In this video, I will talk about how to write the proposal for a BSc or MSc dissertation. I will focus on my discipline, finance, or related disciplines such as economics. I usually ask my students to think about a research question. So put differently, what do you want to know? I covered the topic choice in a different video, and there I outlined that it would make sense to focus on an empirical research project. Basically, theory is too demanding and too time-consuming. The same applies to collecting your own data or conducting interviews. Any qualitative research is not suitable in finance, I would argue. So I personally suggest stick to a quantitative approach and focus on an empirical project. Arguably, you see more and more academic papers that use experiments or numerical methods. But again, for a dissertation project, this is too demanding because very frequently you will need advanced programming skills. The starting point is a broader question. For instance, why do firms hold cash? The first thing I suggest is to go to Google Scholar and simply look for the key papers in this area of research. I tend to argue that you should focus on maybe the last 5 years, so you can restrict your search for the last 5 years, and you can focus on the top journals. So for instance, in finance, it would be the Journal of Finance, the Journal of Financial Economics, and the Review of Financial Studies. Focus on maybe the last 5 years and identify the 2-3 key papers on your research topic. You can also look at citations. So citations, they give you an idea about the importance of a paper. It's not a perfect measure, of course, but it gives you a sense of what's the impact of a paper in the academic community. Most likely, you will have to narrow down. So once you start looking at the top 3 papers in the case of corporate cash holding, you will find out that some papers focus, for instance, on precautionary cash holding, others focus on corporate governance and other aspects. So at one point you might consider modifying the topic a tiny bit and focusing more on a particular area. And this is very common when you do research. You start with a broader idea and then you narrow down. So in a way, as an academic, you know more and more about less and less until you know absolutely everything about absolutely nothing. But that's the fate of an academic. So what should be covered in your proposal? Now, I strongly suggest have a look at your course handbook, because the course handbook should outline what exactly is expected in terms of word count, and it will also outline whether the proposal is actually part of your final mark. Sometimes it is, sometimes it might account for 10% of your final mark. However, I would argue these 4 elements should be usually covered. So something about the literature, data, methods, and your plan. So what do you want to do? What's your structure? Nobody expects you to know it all at this stage. So when it comes to the literature, it would be perfectly fine to identify maybe 2-3 key papers and start exploring these papers. Get a sense of the different subtopics covered. Maybe be able to talk about the main strands of the literature in this particular area of finance. So it's not expected that you read all these papers in detail. It's not expected that you really have a deep understanding of the literature, but get an idea. Next, you should know something about the data. So what are the data sources? What are the data providers? Is it public data? Is it private? What type of data is needed? Is it high frequency data? Is it panel data? So what's the type of data structure? I think that's quite important to check out before you really start. Methods, again, a broad understanding of what is used in these key papers, regression models, for instance, logistic models. Then finally, your plan. So what do you want to do? What is your main research question? You might have already an idea about the structure of it. You might have an idea about different hypotheses. And so put it down and provide a brief outline of what you try to achieve. Usually I use the following checklist, and of course the checklist is interrelated with the topic choice as well. So number one, is there literature? If the answer is no, or if the answer is maybe yes, but not in any good academic journal, I would be very careful. Most likely it's better to change your topic. Can you follow the top papers? It's not necessarily about a deep understanding of it, but at least can you follow? So when you start reading the paper and it looks all completely alien to you, have no idea what's going on, then maybe it's not the right one for you. Does the literature use standard methods? And this is usually the case. So in corporate finance, for instance, if you go to the mainstream finance journals, the papers tend to use, quite similar methods. So for instance, a regression model, maybe some logistic model, and then maybe some volatility modeling. All of these things you should have covered in previous courses, so you should be fine. But if you have to learn new methods, you have to be realistic because you have quite a significant time constraint. Finally, do you have access to data? This is quite fundamental because you don't want to waste your time on data collection or getting into difficulties when it comes to data providers. So I would stick to mainstream data, which you can obtain from Bloomberg or DataStream or similar. Good, I hope this was helpful. I hope you have a good time writing a dissertation, and I see you in the next one.